Greetings, everyone. Parker Sedicase is a prolific podcaster who focuses on Christian theology, and Parker is pursuing his master's degree in theology at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. Porn addiction and the other topics we talk about are difficult and sensitive, and they're conversations that need to be had, but I am not as graceful as I could be in my words, so I do cut some parts out, just FYI. At the end of the podcast, Parker does try to convert me back to Christianity, and he does come close, I will admit, but I will put links to Parker's work as well as the Spotify version of this podcast in the description below. I hope you enjoy. The last maybe month or two, I've talked to some friends of mine from college or whatever, and I did a video a while back on David Dobrik. This whole sexual assault situation. I don't know if you're familiar with, but I talk about like culture of oversexualization, sexual assault, and I had friends reach out to me, talk to me about that, but they also brought up like porn addiction and we were talking at the end of the last podcast, like not a lot of people talk about it. So I think it actually is pretty useful. And I certainly have stuff to say about it, but do you want to give your background on what your experience is?
Well, so we were talking about dreams. We were talking about,
right.
Like, I said,
do dreams have, because in my belief, dreams seem to have religious significance. They're the closest thing to not prophecy, maybe prophecy, but religious experience that certainly I've experienced. But
yeah, well, so I was reading Peterson's Beyond Order, and his one about art. He's like, make one room as beautiful as you can in your house. He talks about dreams as like as a masterpiece, as like an art, a form of art. I had no idea, dude. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And he's like, no, it's creativity. And I thought, that's kind of true. Like, that's my mind on full, just raw creativity, just tossing stuff out
unleashed.
There, right?
Yes. Right.
Yeah. And
like an acid trip almost, like a hallucinogenic trip. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's so I don't know the neurochemistry behind that, but I'm sure some of that, maybe there's some DMT going on.
Sure.
I know it naturally is in our bodies. So I guess when he said that, I thought, I always kind of thought dreams come from somewhere else, but I never gave it like a religious significance that you were thinking of and stuff. So I'm still thinking through like what are dreams. What we got onto the topic of porn because I have felt like God has spoken to me through dreams, and for me it's usually to call me out. It's usually sometimes I'm like, bro, I don't know what this is supposed to mean, or if it's just me being crazy. Maybe I ate too much pizza. Other time, but when there is a message, it's like, nope, bro, don't be doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Stop. Don't do that. And the most significant one for me was I had a good friend who confided in me that they were having a hard time with porn. And I just, in a moment of weakness, like let my guard down. I was like, dude, me too, for like years and years. And we were like, dude, we got to help each other.
Right.
We never talked about it again. And then like 3 months later, he calls me up and is like, hey, dude, how you doing with porn? And I'm like, hey, no problem. No big deal. I got it under control. That was kind of a one-time thing. I'm safe. And he's like, that's weird, man. I just had this dream that we were in your parents' basement. It was on fire. And I'm like, Park, we got to get out of here. And me in the dream was saying like, no problem, no big deal. We're safe. So he's like, I don't know if this is from God or what. Kind of makes me think you actually are struggling with porn and you're lying to me right now. And I started breaking down crying. And not because I'm like, God is real, but like, no, God, like I never doubted God was real or not. You told my secret to my friend, like, screw you, dude. Right. Are you serious? That was between you and me. I was working that out. And I realized then that God was like, bro, you are not going to be able to keep this secret anymore because it's going to eat you up. It's going to be, and the Bible calls lust like a consuming fire. One of the Proverbs says, can a man carry coals next to his chest? Or a different translation says, can a man heap coals on his lap and not be burned? And that's like following the adulterous woman. That's like giving into lust. It's burning. It's a burning, consuming fire, and not in like a cool way, in like a you're gonna get scalded kind of way. So yeah, that's where we're at with the dreams going into the porn addiction. I started early in porn because I had older brothers. They were in puberty while I was a little kid. But even before that, was abused by my neighbor. She's a couple years older than me. One of my neighbors. I was like 6, so she was like 9 or 10. And I told you last time, like 10-year-old girls don't do that, so she was abused by someone, her uncle, her dad, someone abused her. So I don't like hold that grudge or anything like that. But it woke me up to sex really early. Like, people are like, let's go play dodgeball. I'm like, hey, that supervisor, lunch supervisor's hot, stuff like that.
Sure.
So then just got into porn, and it had its grips on me. And I started living two different lives, because here I am, this good little church boy. Bro, I can't tell someone that like I watch porn that was abused sexually. Like I can't tell them that. So that's staying over here and this is staying over there. And it made me really resent Christian culture in general, just like little boys. Like I was not a little boy any longer. So
Right.
everyone like acting like little kids. I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm thinking more like an adult, not only because of being opened up, but I had older brothers. So I want to hang out with them anyways.
Right.
And then on top of that, you got this weird Christian culture, which is tuck in your sweater vest and you leave your sin at the door, right? Because we're good little Christians. And I was like, I hate everyone. I hate all of you. You're not real.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it wasn't until college where I saw people being Christians for real. I saw guys that I respect and admire, like manly men on the wrestling team, holding each other accountable, giving each other their Facebook passwords to check in on their messages. Hey, make sure I'm not DMing anyone at 1 a.m. I'm like,
Right.
bro, that's
Right.
wild. That's like for real. You guys really
Sure.
care about each other.
Accountability. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it the first kind of culture you grew up in you'd say was like repressive in terms of that, or?
So my family wasn't, but
Okay, sure.
the Christian culture we were in,
Right.
for sure. Yeah. My family was weird. Like we had real problems. I love my parents. My brother was wild. One of my brothers was absolutely crazy wild. I love him, but started doing cocaine when he was like 14. And my dad would tell the church like, yo, we need some prayer. We need some help. And some people in the church were like, yo, we don't talk about that here.
Wow.
Meanwhile, their kids were doing heroin. Their kids were doing coke.
Sure.
And they had all these problems, but they wouldn't talk to each other. And it was like, yeah, a lot of good you did, bro. Like that's not
Right.
even what Christianity is about. But the cultural Christianity of that area was all jacked up.
Interesting. And then so in college you encountered a different church or a different culture, or?
Yeah, different culture in that these were young dudes who would read the Bible and were just living it out. They were like, "Hey, I actually think that we need each other." There's this
Sure.
another proverb says, "As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another."
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard that before?
The sentiment, sure.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. It's
Right.
and so you take that and you put that on your wrestling wall. But you
Yeah.
don't think that actually means like, "Hey, you said you weren't gonna meet up with that chick because you were not treating her right, right? Or you're going to sleep with her. And now I see you out with her. What's up, dude? Like you asked me to talk. That's like, hey, screw you, man. Back up. That's like the iron sharpening iron, doing the hard work of being like, bro, I'm going to try and help you accomplish your goals. I'm going to try to help you look like Christ.
Right.
We're going to sharpen each other.
Yeah, because one of the things I know, like you're familiar with Young Life, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had a problem with anybody in Young Life specifically, but there is certainly the element of kind of, young high school Christians who, there's like at least where I went to high school, it's like that was a cool group to be part of in some ways.
That was a cool group for you?
Well, cool might be too strong of a word, but it certainly wasn't like looked down upon or anything like that.
Okay.
And they had a lot of social events and stuff. And again, not being a part of it, and I'm not calling out like the Young Life group that I went, to high school with, but certainly the idea of like hypocrisy in that, like you have the Christian kids who go to church, and I was big into church camp and stuff when I was maybe like 6th grade and middle school, around there. And like, okay, you'd be praying and like, oh, I'm about God and all this. And then they'd be going out and, get a blowjob in the stairwell or some shit like that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like that hypocrisy is, just generally, that's the thing that I think turns people off to. I think that's the biggest criticism people have against religion in their like day-to-day life. It's like, well, I know people that, oh, well, I believe in God, but I'm all high and mighty about it and something like that.
Yeah.
But the people you're talking about, it's like actually holding people accountable and whatnot.
Yeah, man. And calling each other out, because so all Christians are hypocrites because we're called to be sinless.
Well, right.
and we
Everyone's a
can't,
hypocrite. Right.
And so acknowledging that takes away a lot of that sting. Hey, bro, I actually can't live up to it. I am a hypocrite. And so are you. So come join us, man. Let's
Right.
work on this together. Let's not live in our hypocrisy. Let's work on it. But I was that hypocrite. Dude, that was me too. Like I felt like I could not control myself. I didn't feel like any power over that sin. And then there's all sorts of neurological crap that happens too, like neural ruts. You start thinking about something and you get these neural
Yeah.
ruts.
Positive
easier to
feedback
form.
loop. Yep.
So
Yep.
the more you watch porn, the more it happens, the more you objectify women, the more you see them and you fight it. But you give into it, right? And you're two different people. And then when 10 o'clock at night hits, your mind is used to doing that. So
Yeah.
you start texting all the girls on your phone, you start looking at porn, whatever, and then you're done. You go, I'm so sorry. Hey, no, I actually don't feel that about you. I should have not said any of these things.
Sure. So to the porn specific, was it specifically porn, or were you like hooking up with a bunch of girls too and
Yeah.
going out and stuff? Yeah.
Anyone that would, I wanted to be, I probably wanted to be God, bro. Like I probably wanted to be God. I thought I was a wrestler. I thought that I was going to come in just all hulked out and every girl's going to be drooling over me, because that was kind of the pinnacle for me. Like if girls wanted me sexually, I made it. I must have made it, man, because that's kind of, that was this, and I never talked about my abuse as a kid. I pushed that down. Every now and then it would come up and nope, I'm not thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hear people talk about repressed memories. I'm like, that must be weird to have those.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time I didn't realize, like, yeah, I was cramming that down too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was probably sixth, seventh grade. I discovered porn, and like when I discovered initially, it was it was like once every day, twice sometimes. And I don't think I was ever addicted, so to speak. I mean, that first time, that first period when you just discover it. Yeah, I think there's no other way to say that. But dude, just the way that it's like for me, there's the element. Okay, like you're saying, it's like that rut. It's like, okay, you build up the structure and you develop specific taste. Like I can, when I take my phone out, it's like, all right, my body already knows, like, all right, I'm, ready to go. I know what I'm about to do or whatever. And this is a broader thing I want to talk to you about, just like cultural sexualization in general. It's like, is it okay to just use someone for sex, even if they not verbally, just explicitly, say, I'm just over here for sex or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, because I have this issue of, well, like, I'm against that. I'm the experiences that I've had are like, I feel ashamed saying like, okay, well, I'd bring a girl over, we do whatever. And then like, once we're done, we're just laying there and she's in my bed and it's like, dude, I don't like this person. I feel no connection to this person. And I feel like, even if it was just, yeah, we came over just to hook up or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's like, it's still just an element of like, I just hate that. And porn is like, okay, well, you do it, you use it, you finish, and then boom, you can go on your computer and do whatever. And you completely cut out that whole emotional side of it, and that connection thing. And I think that is where the biggest danger comes. No pun intended. That's where people can get screwed up the most, because it's like, you can't separate the person from the sex, and porn, I think, reinforces that a ton.
Yeah. So I used to think that, okay, I'll just watch porn instead of bothering some poor young girl, instead of like telling her I love her and then hooking up with her and then breaking her heart or whatever.
Saying whatever you need to say and just pretend fake interest and all that.
I'll just watch porn and that will be fine. But I didn't realize that was reinforcing the habit still. That was still, and then not to mention some poor girl who's in the porn, whether she's there voluntarily or was manipulated into it or was a sex slave or whatever. I have no idea.
Which is a huge thing that some people are taught, like it's coming out more recently, but that's a big thing too. It's just like the porn industry.
Yeah, dude. Right. Yeah. With the whole Pornhub thing. Like,
yep.
Yeah, there's freaking sex slaves on there that someone was
underage abuse, all that. Yeah.
Bro, that's insane. And so, yeah, man. So there's a bunch, there's like philosophical arguments for it too. I know that there's some people who are like, we want to, this is sexual freedom. There's some people who still think that's cool. They still think that's cool. It's like, bro, this isn't the 60s, man.
Yeah.
Like, you're regurgitating the same old lines.
Which the 60s were riddled with sexual assault that we don't hear about. We just hear the Woodstock acid and have fun and love and all that.
You're how many years, 60 years later or whatever, like, oh, fine. You can go try that. And if that works for you, I don't think it's going to, but you can go try that. Like you're free to do that. But, there's the objectification. I think it's probably, I know first wave feminists were about this and probably a lot of second wave feminists who are like, no, don't objectify me. And then look, I'm not an expert on feminism or third wave, but third wave seems like their mothers and grandmothers were like, men are pigs. So we're not having sex with a man who's like a pig like this. You're a pig. And the pig stayed here and said, fine, I'll find some other girl. I'm not going to go with any of you. And so they drifted. And it seems like the third wave and beyond says, well, men are pigs, so we're going to be a pig too. And the guys who are pigs, they never changed. They didn't change their location. They stayed in the same spot, and women came back around.
I've seen I think it was a YouTube comment, maybe even. There's wisdom in YouTube comments, believe it or not. I think it was somewhere else. But someone pointed out, like, instead of sort of condemning, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be, using people as sex objects. Maybe we should be, taking a more, I don't know, human approach or something rather than just pure liberation, which I think that does fit a small number of people. Like, I have friends who are very open-minded, very like kind of creative people who guy can meet a girl, fall in love for a week, and then, genuinely think he's in love with her. And it turns out it's not. And it's like, if they're both consenting and they're both kind of creative people, like, that's fine. But I don't think that's the case for most people. But what this thing was pointing out was exactly what you said, is like, instead of sort of reeling back, like, the fact, like, oh, well, men can sleep around and that's held up to high regard, so why can't women? It's like, well, we shouldn't be holding either up to high regard.
Yeah.
Right? And
yeah. Well, that goes back to what I wanted, man. I wanted to be this God king who was just this beast. And then it wasn't until this pastor, who I actually respected because I hated pastors for a long time, but this pastor was awesome. He goes, hey, sleeping with a bunch of girls is actually not a strong thing. It's actually a weak thing. You can have sex with someone. Like, you can go out and find, I know there's incels or whatever now, I guess, but like, you can find someone to do that, or you can pay someone to do that. If worst comes to worst, you can pay someone to do that. It's actually harder to say, I'm going to hold off. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hold off. I'm going to save myself for someone I care about, and I'm going to not collect emotional baggage or emotional scars or whatever. I'm not going to do that. That actually takes more restraint, especially when you are a stud. If girls do want you, it takes more restraint
and to
not go for that.
Right, and to the point about, like, the incel types thing, it's like there is a difference between, like I said, like, to be able to do that and then choose not to out of will versus being the kind of guy that no girl wants to be with because you're irresponsible, because you don't have any direction, because you sleep 12 hours a day. Yeah, right. You don't even take care of yourself. It's like, so, there's an element of, what would you say? Not antithesis or antipathy against kind of the hookup culture that I think does stem from resentment on the part of, like,
oh yeah, because if they could, they would.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
They can't, so they don't.
And then that's used as a cover to say, actually, no, look at yourself and say, what are you not doing? Or, like, and it's funny, dude, on one of the videos I did, like 300 people commented or 400 people commented or whatever. There was like 15,000 views or 14,000 views it was at. So you have a lot of people seeing it. And some of the comments, most of the comments I would say were great. Some, positive stuff. But I saw some that were just like, I hesitate to say it. Maybe I'll cut it out afterwards. But it was like, he said something like, holy shit, bro. Like, that is exactly the type of shit that's like, that's bad. And, part of what I'm trying to do, and just even in this conversation, is like, how do we reach those people? And how do you point out, like, hey, there is validity in, like, like we were just saying, like, we should value, like, monogamy and, a respectable culture, but it doesn't stem from just like, like you were saying, like, all men are pigs. Well, it's like, well, all women are not pigs too. The generalization and the gender identitarian garbage, I think, is so toxic at the bottom of a lot of this. But
that was a great question. I didn't know you were going to go there. How do we reach him? Because that's actually not part of our culture right now. And dude, if someone else says cancel culture, I'm going to throw up. Like the Gen Xers got it and the boomers. And once they get the words, they ruin it. And I love you guys.
That's so true.
They get it.
That's
and they go,
so true.
Once my family and my extended family starts going, we live in a cancel culture. I'm like, who told you guys?
It's like snowflake. It's like I hear snowflake. I'm like, okay, that's just.
You guys killed it. You guys kill all of our words because you use them like a dummy, and you don't actually know what they mean. You don't know the historical context. Like, not that we're all experts on it, but we live in the milieu. Right. We do know what it means, and we're using it. So I'm not saying you guys don't get to use the words, but the way you use them just kills them. But what I'm saying is there is no grace in our culture right now. There is no extending, giving people slack. But there's also no redemption. There's no, how do you get your way back? Is there any kind of forgiveness that's available? And do we just write off anyone with the wrong opinion? Or like, if they have the wrong opinion, shouldn't you want to persuade them?
Right.
And Dude, I'm a Christian. My whole life is supposed to be doing that.
Right.
And I still get lost in that. Where when you said that about the guy, I'm like, what a dick, dude. Screw that guy.
Right.
And I wasn't thinking like, oh man, I wonder how we could reach that guy and help him see the light.
Right. Well,
You
and
know,
that,
so
and like, and I know people, and I've, you know, I'm online and I look at these things of like, okay, the incel groups and what do people say? What's their rationale and all this stuff? And it's like, when that guy commented on the video, part of me was like, dude, is this the kind of people I'm attracting with my video? Like, I was like, damn, dude, that sucks. Like, that actually
yeah,
sucks.
you can't really choose your audience. That's
Right,
kind of
right,
scary
right.
too.
But then there's the point of like, well, I made a video criticizing someone, and like that happens to align with their views, so that makes it bad. And it's like,
Yeah.
and that's a feeling because, you know, that is irrational to think that. But like, when I thought about it more, I was like, again, I'm trying to take a mental health focus. I'm trying to start from, I don't, the abstract ideas are only important to me insofar as they serve the cause of how do we improve people's mental health, whether it's your individual mental health or someone else's or whatever.
Mm.
And so the idea of like, well, maybe this person came to my video and then saw another video of like you and I talking about porn addiction or something like that, or another different video where I talk about therapy. And then that sort of brings them back into the fold.
Mhm.
And so that's a big thing. I wanted to ask, how did you get out of your addiction? What was like the pathway out of that?
So that's where the dream came through, because now it wasn't my secret anymore. Now it wasn't my shame. It wasn't my embarrassment. It wasn't God.
Because one other person knew. Was he the only other person that really knew at the time?
He's the only one at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then some of my other friends knew, but they didn't see it as a problem, and they weren't in as deep as I was. They didn't start when they were 5 and go into some creepy, dark, world.
Sure.
And so yeah, it wasn't until college where I saw other dudes confessing to each other. Hey man, like how you doing? You told me last week that you wanted me to check in on you. I know this is awkward, but I'm checking in on you. Oh
Mhm.
dude, actually I'm having a hard time, man. And here's why. And so then I guys, the confession in amongst the guys is like reciprocal. If someone confesses something to you, not only do you feel safe, you feel obligated to confess back to them.
Yes,
Bro,
that is
I'm
so
just like
true.
I
And
get it.
in the last like 6 months for me, because like I said, I've been in therapy for a while, and I was talking to my friends about stuff I never talked about before. Exactly that phenomenon. I would start talking
Yeah.
about therapy or something, and then another friend would be more willing to open up about something he had gone through. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my god, this conversation never would have happened had I
Yeah.
not taken that initial step.
It's yeah, so it's the initial step. Someone's got to be vulnerable, and that word sucks because it's been used wrong too, right? Like, oh, I'm
Yeah,
vulnerable.
vulnerable.
No, it's just,
Yeah, yeah,
dude, it
yeah.
just means putting yourself just, hey,
Well,
here's
that's
what's up.
courage. That's real courage.
Yeah,
Courage is I'm
right.
gonna tell you exactly my biggest insecurities
Yeah.
and not let it own me. You know?
And with men, that courage comes in the last 5 minutes of hanging out usually. So it's on your
Oh my
walk back
god,
to the
that's so
car.
true. Yes.
Yeah, it's the walk back to the car. Plus, men talk shoulder to shoulder. Ladies talk, face to face. This is not a universal absolute truth.
Sure.
There's guys that I go and get coffee with, and they're more comfortable doing that, and they're not effeminate. Some of them are, super
Mhm.
masculine dudes. They just prefer to talk face to face. A lot of guys I know, disc golf. I don't disc golf as much anymore, but I'll take up these kind of things where we're side to side. Campus golf, where you just take a cheesy iron and you take a tennis ball and you walk around campus and you
Sure.
call your shots.
Nice.
Because you don't have to look at me in the eyes, man. It's cool. That's all
Right.
right. But we're broing down. You can look at me in the last 5 minutes, right?
Right.
But
Dude,
yeah,
yes. The last
it's opening up.
yeah, man. The last 10 minutes of hanging out. And usually I don't know how much alcohol or drugs you do, but sometimes it's like when we're drinking or when we're high afterwards, and it's like it's all kind of gone through our system, and we're kind of right at the edge of our just like feeling vulnerable, just because it's like we're drained now, and then it's like, yo, man,
Sure.
just blah 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 or whatever you talked about.
Yeah,
this
the
or
guard
whatever.
comes down.
Yeah.
You could talk to them about their father who just died or whatever. Like that stuff kind of opens up. A bonfire is another great one. Bonfire. So I don't do drugs, but smoke a pipe, smoke cigars,
Mhm.
have a couple
Yeah.
beers around a bonfire.
Yes.
Because you're both even though if you might be facing them, you get to look at the fire
Right.
and you get to look at that, and it's just kind of ideas coming out. It's dark. Like it's
Sure.
cool. It's all right, man. We're just talking. I trust you.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that too, because when like I said, I went to therapy in this would have been almost a year ago, maybe 10 months ago. And I was like breaking down crying on some stuff that I just hadn't articulated to anyone. And repeatedly I found anytime I would open up to my friends and tell them about, whatever had happened and where I was, I couldn't look at them. And I would look up and I'd be like, this thing or whatever. And so you saying like looking at a fire, it's like, yeah, it's like there's an element of like, I just can't look you in the eye because this is so, painful or whatever. And it's vulnerable. And it's just like, so that I love that, I don't know, advice or just that observation of like, it's in the last couple minutes of hanging out. And, or if it's not like a one-to-one, hey, we're going to talk. And I've always hated that. I always hated that notion of like, man, I would feel so weird just texting one of my friends out of the blue, like, hey, can we talk about something? Like I always had this notion of it had to be in the context of like, it came up naturally, or in some cases, if I had a problem with my friend, it would be, we'd have to get in a fight. We'd have to get angry at each other. And then in my anger, I could feel justified opening up or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
And just on multiple occasions I just texted them or whatever, and just said, hey, I need to talk to you about this. And it's like, that was always the right move, always the right move.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that also brings up the necessity of community. Like you actually need to be known by people. And so I'm bringing a lot of Christian-y words, but these are things that Christianity offers, the community, the church community, where you're known by people. But it's because it is practical. It does work well. You need to have people in your life who know you well enough to be like, hey, bro, it's this time of year and your dad passed away or your girlfriend broke up with you this time or whatever. Like, dude, guys aren't that sentimental, but it might pop up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying they're marking their calendars for you,
Mm-hmm.
but it could pop up. I would say God would prompt them to talk with you about that.
Sure.
And it comes up and you go, dude, didn't your dad die? Like, how are you doing, man? It's been like a year. Like, how are you doing with that, dude? Anything I can do to like, probably don't say anything I can do to help, because that kind of pushes it off. But,
sure.
But because then it's like not.
Yeah, but your point about community. I mean, like, I noticed, and again, something that's kind of in the midst of understanding now is like when I talk to a lot of my friends one-on-one, when I FaceTime them for an hour or two, we can talk about whatever in any circumstance. When we get in a group and it's like 6 guys or all of us together, you just kind of can't, especially if it's like, if there has been scenarios where, like you're saying, end of the day or around a fire or something, there's environments that are conducive to those kind of conversations. But like I have noticed, if I, like I have 2 good friends of mine, I told them both about the stuff I went through in therapy. And then when it was us 3, the dynamic was so different and, but good in that it wasn't just open between 2 people, it was open between 3. And that like 3 is a community in a sense, 2 is a relationship, 3 is a community. And even that opens up space that was not there before, because not only am I honest in relationship, and not only am I being honest in relation to one person or the other, now there's a new thing that's all 3, and then that expands more and more.
That's a great point. So C.S. Lewis talked about that when one of his friends died. He was in this group of writers in Oxford, all these Oxford dons. So Tolkien, writing Lord of the Rings, Lewis writing Narnia, all these things, and other friends. Lewis said he was sad when one of his friends died for the sake of his friend, but also now because he lost that part of Tolkien. So this other friend died, but the other friend brought this something out of Tolkien that only this guy did when they were in a group together. And now that part of Tolkien's gone as well.
Interesting.
Because they were such good friends, because the dynamic that you're talking about, when you have 3. Right. Now the whole community has lost something because this guy was situated in the community and brought something out of every individual.
Right, that was bigger than himself.
But what you were talking about with the group is another part of how I kind of got over my porn addiction and the hookup culture type stuff that I was trapped in. My buddies would always hang out in the garage. They smoke weed. They would, take gummies and drop acid or whatever they were doing that night. I just couldn't be around like more than 3 of them at a time. And it was weird for them to hear that. But I'm like, bro, I love you guys. I can't go to the garage anymore.
Sure.
I can hang out with 2 of you.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, man. When it gets to 3 or 4, it brings out something dark in me, and I can't do it.
Yeah. The worst thing is to be around people that are like drunk or on drugs, and you're not, and it's just, it's like, oh yeah, I definitely feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a big part of the community aspect, huge part of it. Yeah.
Do you hear that? Did you hear that again?
I don't hear it.
Okay.
I don't hear it.
There was another bat that felt like it was flying through the room. The community aspect. Yes. One thing I wanted to ask you. Okay. More specifically, you're familiar with OnlyFans, I assume, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's like Instagram but it's exclusively for porn. What do you think, and maybe more, and this is porn in general, like, do you think it should be, how do we address the problem of porn and the problem of oversexualization? Maybe specifically with young men, but then more broadly in the culture. I mean, do you think it should be illegal?
No. So
Yeah, me neither.
I'm more libertarian on a lot of this stuff.
Right.
And some of my Christian friends will be like, bro, but if, blah, 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 you need to be socially conservative, but, politically conservative. And so
You
I
can't
think
legislate morality, right? Should you
think,
lie? You shouldn't lie.
no, I think we
You can't make it
legislate
illegal.
morality.
Okay, interesting.
I think every law is moral.
Sure, you're right. Okay.
Right.
Fair.
There's an easy thing. I've got caught with that a lot.
Sure.
Hey, you shouldn't legislate morality. And then an older boomer catches me. I'm like, bro, I'm not getting caught by that again.
Fair. Okay.
But we need to have some kind of principle to adjudicate what kind of moral laws are we allowing, which ones are we not. So yeah, even though I think that premarital sex is a sin, like I've committed that. I'm a Christian. I believe Jesus has forgiven me of that sin. I still think it should be legal to do
Right.
that. I don't think we want the kind of society that's going around catching people for doing that and doing that. And you say, well, that could be hypocritical because Old Testament law had these laws. But if you don't know Christian theology, then you don't bring that up. Like people bring this up all the time. You don't understand the old and new covenants and the continuity and discontinuity between covenants that we have from Scripture that we're not just ad hoc thinking of. So there's a whole political Christian philosophy that goes into this. That's important. Okay, cool. I got that. But it's not the government. The government's not going to do it. If you made it illegal, it would skyrocket. Everything the government fights wins. The war on drugs, the war on poverty.
Right.
The government needs to stop fighting wars. Well, I think what we need to do is go upstream a little bit. And here's where we need to reclaim our understanding of humanity. What does it mean to be human? Like, if more people believed that we were made in the image of God, the society would be better. And I don't just mean, we have a spark of divinity or act as if, no, like if you thought that was an image bearer of God and you image God in all of your actions, you'd be a lot more careful in what you do.
Sure.
So this is why people all the time, I work with college kids and they go, hey, why is like telling a lie wrong? I don't get it. Like a kid tells a lie or steals a pack of gum from a 7-Eleven, he's going to go to hell forever? What the heck? And it's like, well, hey, first of all, no one sins once, right?
Right.
But even if they did, you're saying, what you're really saying, you're downgrading it, but you're saying, I don't think it's a big deal that someone is telling a lie about the God of the universe, right? So I'm an image bearer of God. I'm supposed to represent him everywhere I go. If I go around lying and stealing and treating women like trash, I'm telling the whole universe, God lies, God steals, God treats women like trash. So reclaiming this idea of image bearer of God, so not just made in his image, but representing him.
Sure.
Like, bro, it's really hard to be happy like watching porn when you think, hey, I'm telling all the clicks that I'm giving or whoever that God is a pornographer. God likes porn. God likes a women being abused and objectified or men being abused and objectified, right? Because that's a new thing that's come out that, hey, some of these men don't want to do this either, or they're finding their worth in how long they can keep a boner for, right? Like, what kind of world is this?
Right.
So I think downstream, that is where theology is still important, and people don't see that. They don't think that, but also the philosophy there, like consciousness and right, like we need to reclaim some of that self-consciousness. I think so that guy that commented on your channel, like having a conversation with him and being like, bro, like, what do you mean by that? Is that just a stupid joke, or do you actually think that women are lesser than men because they have a gag? Like, do you not have a gag reflex? Let me put a toothbrush down your throat. Like, what are you talking about, bro? I don't understand what you're talking about.
Right.
And just reasoning with them and being like, bro, I get it. You're trying to be funny. What do you really think about women?
Right. Well, and yeah, it's like, and this going back to the you can't legislate, whatever. It's like it has to come upstream. It has to be in culture. There's this element of culture that you, and I think you'll appreciate or certainly respond to this well, is like there's in our culture, people believe like your truth is your truth. You should do what makes you happy. You are ultimately know what makes you happy. and you need to follow your bliss, listen to yourself, all that shit. And it's like, part of that is true.
Yeah.
In that, like, your conscience tells you when you're being lazy, right? If you, like, I doubt anyone listening to this would dispute the fact that they have been lazy in the past week, right? By their own standard. So there's a part of you that tells you not tells you what to do, but knows when knows what you need to do, right? And like for me, like, okay, making these videos or having these conversations or whatever. But I specifically, and more in the last couple of years, have come around to, like, people rarely know what is best for themselves. You wouldn't have the mental health crisis be as bad as it is. You wouldn't have the rates of suicide. You wouldn't have the rates of depression if people knew what was best for themselves in the moment. There's an element of, and again, being secular, let's say, compared to you, there is an element of, like, and I think the religious language is better here, like surrender. I'm going to surrender to something bigger than me. I'm going to surrender to the fact that, okay, I'm 24, or if I was 18 or 15 or whatever, like, I am a dumbass. I don't know anything, which is okay, because admitting that now is the first path that when I'm older, then I will be the kind of person that not only knows things for myself, but knows things for other people. Yeah. And you know, I like, then the question is like, well, how do we act on that? What's the instrumentation behind that? You think more it's probably like, let's get a direct Christian theological route. And I, you know, and you could be right. And I think, like we were talking about last time, it's like, I think not the solution to all of our problems, but one thing we need to do as a society and as individuals is buy into the same shared narrative. And I think that narrative has that Judeo-Christian ethic to it. But I definitely think in our culture, the idea of, like, well, you know, like, if and again, so like OnlyFans, and this is something that, well, I don't know what people think. I'm trying to have as many conversations as I can about this so I can learn more and, you know, not sound as stupid as I might sound. But, like, you know, should we celebrate OnlyFans? It's like, well, there's people who say, oh, it's an art, it's a business, it requires entrepreneurship, it requires this and stuff. It's like, that's true, but but what is the ultimate product? The ultimate product is something for men to masturbate to. So all of the things you could say about OnlyFans, that, like, hey, it takes a lot of work, there's an artistic element to it, you have to market, you have to have a customer base, all that. It's like, that is literally word for word. You could say that about selling drugs. And I would say it's the same effect in terms of, like, you know, there probably are a lot of people who dispute, though there certainly are a lot of people who dispute the harmful effects of porn. There are a lot of people who clearly point out that there are harmful effects, and, you know, you and I being two of them. But I feel like very few people think that watching a lot of porn is a good thing. You know, I get the idea it introduces you to sex, and you know, but even that's a terrible way to get introduced to sex, you know? So,
and
I don't know.
and
What do you think about
not to mention the violence towards women that comes because of this, right? Like, and I'm not saying it's a one-to-one, but violence towards women, sexual violence goes up as porn use goes up. And so, yeah, man, I understand you're an entrepreneur and stuff, but you might be contributing to violence against other women. It may not ever affect you.
Right. And I think their argument would be, because, like, a platform like OnlyFans gives them the power, they don't need to rely on Pornhub or whatever, or these big agencies. And I get that. But I think at least in my perspective, the fundamental issue is just, like, you know, like, I know women who would be horrified if there were, like, nude images of them on the internet, right? Sure. And I'm going to struggle to articulate this exactly.
You sound like a prude now, dude.
Yeah, right. Well,
over in my camp.
Dude, yeah, well, but it's like, you know, if you're a woman and you feel that way, like, I don't want nude images of myself online. It's like, well, what are you implying about women who do OnlyFans? And now you look like now you're in the wrong or something like that. And it's like, that to me is that idea of, like, you know, like the idea of monogamy versus polyamory. It's like, I don't think those two things can exist in the same culture over a long period of time. I just don't, because it's like, you know, and I think polyamory is kind of in the same category of the things we're talking about, but it's like, you know, if you're in a monogamous relationship and then that person cheats on you, they could just fall back to the excuse of, well, it turns out I'm polyamorous. And then all of the polyamorous people would go, hey, that's valid. And so now you have two rifts and you like there's a rift in this culture that we think that people can just get along or whatever. It's like that's not how humans are. That's complicated.
The poly folks might be jumping in here saying no. Of course, we still have consent, and if that person didn't consent to it beforehand,
sure,
then right. So
and I'm not referring to and I'm not talking about consent per se.
I just want to just to preempt some pushback from any poly folks listening. Like, okay, we we don't want to paint with a broad brush or say you guys
of course
anything like that. But I get what you're saying, man, and I think so. We've talked about this before, but you're more pragmatic minded than I am, and I want to get to the truth
in the
question,
philosophical sense.
Sure, yeah, right. So like, yeah, of course. So like, I want to get to like the telos of humans. Like, do we have any end goal? Is there any kind of ontology that makes me a human? And if so, like, is there a God? Like, hey, look, you before you go out and do all these actions, give some some critical self thought to these questions. Do I believe that there's a God? Do I believe that the world is jacked up? Are people mostly good, mostly bad, broken? Some good, some bad, but broken. Um, are we all socially constructed? All these kind of big high level questions before you go out and you can't do it totally before you go out, but you should be thinking as there's a hermeneutical spiral that should be going on in your mind as you're going out and living and reflecting on your beliefs. If you do believe that there's a God, or if you do believe everything happens for a reason, why? Why does everything happen for a reason? Is it because there's a God controlling the universe? If so, if you do think everyone is made in God's image, are you imaging him the way that he would want to be? He, she, it?
Sure.
Is it one God, right? So having these kind of ideas, we don't, as Americans at least, we don't think about them. We're 2 questions deep. Hey, what do you believe? I'm not quite sure. Maybe this. Why do you believe that? Right.
Some experience as a kid. My parents believed it. Yada yada yada.
Right. And we need to have those conversations, secular, non-secular, Hindu, Muslim, everyone. And so is OnlyFans a good thing? Well, it depends on your operating system. I don't think it's a good thing. I actually think that it dehumanizes women and objectifies them. And I'm against that from a Christian perspective. I think that that's somebody's daughter made in the image of God, who I think that's a shameful action. I think that's meant you can be super sexy for your husband. And I don't mean like you're a piece of meat only good for being sexy for your husband, but in the context of marriage, that's an awesome, beautiful thing. But when that's spilling out into
it's easy to integrate your sexuality in a trusting relationship than it is on a platform that essentially monetizes your body and all that.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, someone is still making money on OnlyFans from you doing that, and so there could be that. But I get the freedom part, but there's also freedom in restraint. In restraining yourself to one person, you have the freedom to be wholly open with them. You're wholly trusted, wholly known with somebody. When you commit yourself, you make that commitment. Yeah, you've committed yourself. You are in restraint. You are constrained to that person, but you're free to be yourself.
Right.
It's
liberating. Right.
It's awesome. Yeah, that was one of the best things when I got engaged. I thought, hey, look, I don't have to be sexy in the abstract anymore. That used to be the worst, bro. Everything I do, the way I couldn't have a mustache because most girls aren't gonna like a mustache, right? I only have to make one.
I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty good look, dude. I don't know.
Thanks, man. I only have to make one girl happy now. Like, I only have to make one person love me. I only have to act in a way that they think is attractive. And if everyone else doesn't think so, I don't care. I already have one.
Right.
This is the one I need to make happy. And it was so liberating to go, dude, this is just a breath of fresh air. But going back, I think I don't want anyone to hear me as like a chauvinist. Like I think a proper view of Christianity would elevate women. Like, hey, you are an image bearer. You are a daughter. If you're a Christian, you're a daughter of God. If you're not Christian, you're still an image bearer of God. Like, you bear his image on you, and I ought not objectify you. There's philosophical points of view. Hey, I shouldn't treat a person as a means instead of an end. I should treat every person as an end in themselves. So I'm not going to use you to gratify my sexual desires. That's actually objectifying, right? It's making someone into an object. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, objectification and dehumanization are functional synonyms, right? If it's for the purpose of just sexualizing, and again, it just goes back to there's all these nuances of, well, if the person is doing it willingly,
I know.
is that different? It's like, yes, well, obviously it's different, but is it
Yeah.
it's different in some ways, but it's not in others, because you're still
Right.
participating in the process of objectification. And I
Mhm.
just like the idea of young men, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, again, the type of person that would comment that shit on a video of mine, paying for intimacy from a woman online so that she can make money, basically. Which
Mhm.
again, like, then you enter a whole economic discussion. It's like, well, people need to make money, and if imagine like this woman is paying for her family's medical bills. It's like, we're gonna rob that of her? It's like, no. And so there is all this nuance to it.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. I think at the base of it is a philosophical discussion, and that's what I mean as a shared narrative. What is the narrative, meta narrative? What is the largest narrative that we can inhabit that functions in that way? That will not be included in the final cut, just FYI.
Yeah, I assume. Well, dude, I wanted to ask you, right? So
Yeah.
I've given an answer from my worldview. I think that we need to regain a strong understanding of meaning of self-conscious persons in the image of God. So, bro, like, what do you think? What do you think about the answer to the porn problem, or the meaning crisis, or the objectification and the over-sexualization problem? Like, do you have any thoughts on? I know you have thoughts on it. Do you have any like proposed solutions, you think?
Well, so, and this, I think this actually, in a way, goes back to dreams, because, like I said, that I think dreams are dreams and psychedelic experiences, like on mushrooms and stuff, are sort of are in the realm of experience that are in the religious domain, right? And I know you haven't done any psychedelics or anything like that, right?
No.
So, like, and this is gonna, well, in a very practical sense, this will sound silly, but I think, so I'm not a Christian fundamentalist. I'm not a literalist. Again, I believe in the Judeo-Christian ethic. I think people, and this is actually so interesting, because we have lost our religious understanding and operate in an environment that you more operate in, where you are very confident and clear that, like, God is speaking to you, God is telling you to do this, and you have something that orients you. Most people don't have that. I think, like, I was talking to a couple of my friends actually about, like, panic attacks. I don't know, have you ever had a panic attack where, like, you couldn't?
Just twice, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I've had several while on, like, whether it's edible weed, and I had a close encounter on psychedelics, which I'm never gonna take a lot of psychedelics again. But this idea of, well, when you are disassociating from reality and you don't have an anchor to be like, well, I don't have faith that there's a God or there's some higher power. It's all atoms floating in space. It's all ultimately meaningless. It's like that I think that's a source of anxiety and a source of panic attacks in the most practical sense. And I think, like, because I feel like we can't be certain in a God in the Christian tradition. Again, I think there's approximations in Christianity that are close. I think the idea that truth is of divine value, that the way forward, the way through darkness is to speak truth, which is, again, why we're in my why we're doing these conversations. I'm sure it's similar to you with your podcast. Like, we can't know that, but like, if I feel like if there were, places where community, where people could talk specifically about dreams, but also, and I think this is a practical thing that people think is silly, but, like, therapeutic use of psychedelics, I actually think is a key in, like, opening up people's, or getting people to be open to basically the kind of stuff you're talking about. Because, like, when you, like, a deep mushroom trip, which, like, again, I went to Amsterdam where it's legal there, and you could just do them and walk around or whatever. Like, I mean, it's hard to it's impossible to explain, but once you've been in a state where you're essentially dreaming in waking life, the barrier between consciousness as reality as I experience it and consciousness as it could be, it's like, okay, now these two things, I've experienced both of these things. Whatever rationality I'm using in this state of consciousness does not apply in the other one, and yet the other one is as real of an experience as in, the present waking moment. And it's like, I think you have to use religious language to talk about that. And I think, again, I think clinics, this is what Graham Hancock believes, is like, we should have clinics where people, because we don't have religious rituals and stuff, like we don't have shamanistic traditions, where modern people can go into a clinic and under a trained therapeutic professional, take a small dosage or whatever, and sit there and have a religious experience. I think that is the most practical way. Now, then it's like, are we going to do this on mass scale? What's the feasibility of implementation and stuff like that? Yeah. It's like, I'm just trying to think on the edge here and put it out there in terms of like, how in principle what would not a utopia, but what would the best society, the most functional society look like? It's like, it's one that integrates these religious domains of experience into real life, and we discuss it and we learn about it. And I don't know. And I think like, again, for me, like the dreams have been, and I don't know, I guess that's more unique to me, and I don't go too deep into that, but like.
Yeah. Well, Paul, so I don't want to rain on your parade. I don't.
Please do. No, please rain on my parade.
So in my mind, it sounds nice, dude. I listen to Rogan, I listen to Peterson. Like, I get it. And Peterson talks about, people being able to kick nicotine addiction only if they have the trip.
80% cessation rate or something like that.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. So there's something to that. So there could be like a clinical thing for that. Mm-hmm. I want to push back against a clinical or like a hermetically sealed religious experience.
What do you mean hermetically sealed? I hear that term a lot.
Yeah. So like hermetically sealed is like in a doctor's office. It's all the implements are already sealed. Everything's nice and packaged so that there's and it's really important for a doctor's office. It's really poor for real life. You don't want, you think of like grandma putting the plastic bag on the couch, right? Like,
sure.
So I think, so again, from my Christian worldview, that God has designed us with the neurobiology that does produce DMT, that does produce psychedelic trips in our sleep, right? That do produce these things. I think that when Peterson, I think maybe talks about this. I know people talk about in the cognitive science of religion, people talk about the group exercise of singing together at church and what that does to unify people.
Yeah.
I think that's
awe, I think is they call it.
Yeah, right.
Awe.
Right.
It's like a group. It's an emotion that facilitates group cohesion.
Right.
Awe,
and the more people, right? But you see it at the Cubs game. Go Cubs go at the end when they win, and you hear it from a mile away. So yes, there is an aspect there. I think God designed us for that, for the sake of unity. Some churches will only do that, and they won't talk the doctrine, they won't talk the worldview behind it, and that's just playing on the pleasure receptors in your brain, and I think that's messed up. Likewise, I think if you were to cut out all of the religious significance there and just try to take the receptors and just try to take the serotonin from that experience, I think it's analogous to jerking off by yourself, right? So like sex would be the religious experience in the religious group, genuinely believing it. Going to a clinic is like going to a nice, tidy prostitute who's in a white suit and everything's clean, right? And you go in there and you do your business and you come out and everything's fine. So I think that to me seems like analogous.
Sure.
That
and
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right. You can't, like, Sam Harris is all about spirituality separate from religion.
Right.
And I have issues with that. I think that the criticism you just described, I think, applies to him. And I guess to the degree that I've adopted that worldview, because I actually think from a metaphysical perspective, I actually lean more towards Sam Harris on the very edge of things. And then Peterson is, increasingly seems like he's about to convert. So, you know,
I know we're all holding.
I know that'll pose some interesting problems for me, but you know, maybe inevitable ones. But I mean, dude, I like, again, I sympathize so much with saying, like, when you say God called me to do something, it's like, dude, I'm using the same language when I say I just have to do. I know this is what I have to do. It's like, how,
Yeah.
who, what part of me, and why would I trust that, and why am I not purely rational with stuff? So I get it, and it's just, I mean, from a practical perspective, it's just like,
Yeah.
there are hurdles to get over
Yeah.
in terms of embracing. Again, I grew up Christian, and I went to church camp and stuff, and you know, I went to church, and like, when you talk about the community aspect, it's like, I get that. That's all right there. I just, it's there's an element of, what would the word be? Arrogance is the word that comes to mind. It's not the right word, but the idea of like, well, I am going to, without having your experience, and my experience is different
Bro,
as anyone
you can
else's.
call me arrogant too if you need.
No. I'm not, because
Yeah.
because your experience through childhood, you know, brought you to conclusions that I can't even comprehend per se, right? Or I can't comprehend those experiences, not having lived them. Where I'm at now, for me to kind of commit, I would say intellectually or rationally, to like, well, you're right, like, it's God, and it's the Christian God, and it's the God as this understanding, or somewhere between these two, you know, I only know from your podcast, like simplicity versus something else. I don't know what the language is and all that. Yeah, I don't know what the words mean. Buzzwords right now for me. But for me to do that, it's like, it hasn't clicked for me.
So you should, right? Like, you shouldn't then. Like, if it hasn't clicked for you, like, you actually shouldn't. I don't want you to. I don't. But so since we've got to know each other, I have prayed for you, and I have prayed that you'd have some dreams with some mustache folks in it. Like,
I'm trying to
I
think.
would love to see that, you know. And there's actually this part in the book of Acts where Paul the apostle is talking with some like regents and kings and stuff, and one of the kings, I think it's Agrippa, weird names, but he's talking with Paul, and he's like, Paul, why are you in jail, bro? Like, you've been in jail forever. Why are you in jail? And Paul starts telling him the gospel of Jesus. You know, Jesus died for your sins, and you trust in him for eternal life. And he goes, Agrippa, do you believe? Like, because Agrippa's wife is Jewish, and so he knows a lot of the Old Testament scriptures. And so he's like, you know, I know you're familiar with these texts. Do you believe? And Agrippa goes, Paul, in such a short amount of time, would you make me a Christian? Would you think that I'd be a Christian? He goes, whether long or short or whatever, I hope that all of you would be like me, except for these chains, because he's still in prison. And it was like this epic line, except for these chains. But bro, I feel that, like, in such a short a time, I wouldn't expect you to be like, you know, Parker, you got me, blah, blah, blah. But I believe I believe everything happens for a reason. That's a really American cliche.
Yeah.
I think it's true, because I believe in a personal God who is the author of the story that we're living in. So that means you have a different story than I have. And you went out the back door of the church, and it seems like he's getting you to come back in the front door. And it's funny, because you're seeing like the utility of Christianity, not as a believer, not because you grew up in it, but because you're kind of being penned in. Oh, like, okay, that kind of makes some sense, and that kind of makes some sense. I don't believe the metaphysics of it, but I see the practicality of it, which is interesting.
Well, and dude, I've said, and I plan on doing this at some point, I plan on like reading the Bible. I plan on
you should.
And I don't know if I'm going to take a week-long trip or something on my own to somewhere and just go through it and stuff, but like I plan on doing that. And you know, again, I can't make any promises, but
even from a literary perspective, bro, like, even if just historically speaking, the West is built on this book, I think a lot of people should have some understanding of what it says.
Yeah, it's the canonical text. It's like all of every philosopher and everything goes back, and it ultimately lands on this book. So it's definitely essential. But
you and Peterson, bro, same day. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, right. Yes, that will happen. Dude, we're coming up about an hour and 10, I think. We recorded up until then. Do you want to tell people where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a little bit of stuff on Jordan Peterson's new book, Beyond Order, and that's at my YouTube channel. I have a podcast called Parker's Pensées. The YouTube channel is called Parker's Pensées, and you can find the podcast wherever you find podcasts. You can also find it on YouTube. And I'm looking to put out a lot more content this summer. Actually, Paul, man, have you read Philip K. Dick at all?
Nope, no, don't know the name.
Okay, so you would absolutely love Philip
Actually, I
K.
feel like
Dick.
I've heard that name before, but no, I don't know.
He wrote "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" It's one of my tattoos here.
Nice. Okay.
So he wrote that. That's the book behind Blade Runner. And
Okay.
he read a lot of Jung. He was into Christianity, then got into
Mm.
Jung, and then I think he may have become a Christian like on his deathbed or something. But he took acid the whole time writing all these books. So it's really trippy about reality, and you'd love it. I'll off air. I'll give you
Sure.
some book recommendations. But
Hell
I'm
yeah.
looking to do a lot of work on Philip K. Dick as
Okay.
well.
Word. Sweet. Awesome.